let's talk trade rumors. All right. Thank you guys for. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying this. This is stuff that I've been wanting to talk about, and like, okay, I'm too busy writing, too busy getting frustrated with the rumor mills. Let's talk about let's talk about the Dylan Cease and Luis Robert of it all. All right, so you guys that have read my articles, you know that one of my very first trades that I put out there, the wild Astro trade ideas, was Luis Robert. Right? I'm the one that, if anybody started the rumor, it's me. But I also explained to the fan base how expensive that was going to be. At the time, it was going to be, Jeremy Pena and Jazz McCormick and a couple others in the deal. Well, unfortunately, Pena's trade value has gone down dramatically since then because Jeremy Pena is doing what most sophomores do, having a decent season, but not, probably not the season that most of his fan base thought they could do. So, yes, Liz, you can option up to 5 times. Um, so that trade, also you just saw as when we talked earlier that Dylan Cease is in the group of starting pitchers that I would consider for a trade. The problem is he's very, very expensive. 51 trade value. Now, Luis Robert, who was like 99 before, is 109. So we've got a combined trade value of those guys at 161. I think that the White Sox are actually looking more for that. I don't really think it makes much sense for the White Sox to trade both these two guys together because there's not a lot of teams that have 200 points of trade value that they really want to trade away. Okay, it's hard enough for us Astros fans to even get our hands around what I'll talk about a trade for Robert at the end of this, but a trade for Cease and Robert, it gets wild. So, guys, I have tried to be very honest with this fan base for multiple years. Clint holds me accountable for this. You're like, Larry, that's a dumb trade. Like we when we publish something on when I put something out on the website, I don't. I know I get sometimes my article titles may be clickbaity in nature. Like I'm trying to get you to click on the article to read it, but I think I deliver with the content in those articles. I do not want you to think like, well, that was a complete waste of time reading that because like you basically led me to read this article, and then you told me like there's no way that this is ever going to happen. It just totally wasted your time, right? So when I'm going to say something else, sports media, sports radio is a dying breed in this country, and that's mainly because there's so many. And I don't put out a podcast, so I'm not including myself in this group. But there are daily podcasts that if you are a true sports fan, that you can get all the sports content you really want. Now, I holding myself accountable, I should be in that group of people you come to on a daily basis or at least semi-weekly basis to get content. And my commitment to you is I'm working toward that. But when a radio station, one of the top sports radio stations, um, goes out and puts out a complete rumor, they're amplifying a rumor from a guy that's already misled this fan base for years. I got a little frustrated last night, so I put this article together. Like I said, when I put a trade out there, I'm also showing you their trade values based on that trade value website, which is based on a surplus value model, which is the way teams evaluate these things. Now, whether or not their values are 100% right, they're in the ballpark. And what I try to help people understand is like a lot of my trades, none of you are all that excited about a Montgomery and Stratton deal from St. Louis Cardinals. You may not even know who they are, but I'm telling you, that's about like that's in the ballpark of where I think this team should go in the investment of their prospect capital or their surplus veteran surplus young player value to make a trade. Now, Dana Brown may not agree with me on that. He may go for the home run. You know, like part of the reason Click got fired is because the owner wanted him to be more aggressive. So, maybe they'll cook up all I'll just say is the aggressiveness of the owner didn't really work out in the postseason in the off season. So I hope they don't do something as stupid as the deals that they made in the off season. Okay. I would rather see incremental, like let's hold the core of this roster together and add to it and trade from the margins and continue to fix things as we go. But they may blow me away, and they may have already made a Dylan Cease and Luis Robert trade in the last hour that we've been talking. But if they did, I worry about what they will have paid. So my commitment to you guys has been I don't try to clickbait you with articles about trades that I don't think are going to happen. And I get annoyed with the fact that radio stations would repeat this sorts of thing because they're just fake. I mean, let, Clint, can we talk about like what our history of trades that we've put on this our website?
I mean, last year, I know, right off the bat, we did. You did say that they were going to get Trey Mancini, and that happened. And then we did go and get a left-handed reliever and Will Smith. That did happen. And those are the types of moves that we expected because obviously we operate in the world of really considering what the Astros have to work with. I mean, one of the things that we talked about, we touched on it. Well, Corey Jokes is not valuable because he's 27 and he has a lot of control. That's great. That's happening with a lot of the Astros prospects. That's not just him. He's the example, but there's a lot of guys that are going to continue to get older and not be able to breach and make it into the major league roster. And then you tackle that together with we reap the rewards of success and wins, but we also fall victim to that by what happens in the draft and what we're able to do and what trades we do and did not make that we thought were going to be successful. And so now we're in this situation where you have a roster that is capable of winning the World Series, but you also know that unless you preserve it, you're going to put it in a no-win situation. That's why we talk about pitching. It's like I often have the concept when I hear about Luis Robert and Dylan Cease, it's like, we're getting Luis Robert in the grand scheme does what exactly for this roster in terms of what you have to give up to do it?
Well, it does a lot less than it did, 6 weeks ago when I wrote about it, right? Because
Yeah,
when I wrote about it, we didn't have Chas McCormick on the absolute Babe Ruthian run he's been
yep.
on.
That
I,
and then when you really look at what the pitching staff is facing, can this pitching staff get better and be good enough to supplement when the offense is not on? And then how good can the offense be when Jordan gets back? And then when Altuve's back, and kind of layering in where the weaknesses really are, because I feel like sometimes we get lost in the shuffle of, we're the best team in baseball. We need to make a splash. That's not necessarily the case, and I think this trade deadline is going to prove that there's not a lot out there for a lot of teams to go get, because there's going to be some teams that are not going to be willing to sell based on the fact that they still have a shot. I
Right.
don't see the Padres selling at this point. I think that they still believe that they can fight and potentially win that division, or at least get in through the wild card. And if they get in, obviously they're not gonna benefit from how well Blake Snell is pitching if they send him off somewhere.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
and so that's the toughest thing about it. And I always laugh because a name like Jordan Montgomery, people don't like it. It's not splashy, but this roster doesn't need splash. I mean, we have great players. What we need are the guys that preserve those great players and allow them to shine.
Well, you know what's really good about Jordan Montgomery
Yeah.
is he's left-handed.
Yeah.
So at the end in the postseason, he becomes your long reliever. He could potentially be your long reliever, right?
Well,
And
you just build in more options. I
right,
mean, that was the beautiful thing about the pitching staff in 2022. The abundance of options, the ability to go to so many different people in so many different situations. But it's like we said, we are rolling out Presley and Abreu and our best arms night after night. You know, the expectation that they're gonna be at 100% in the biggest moments of this team's postseason is gonna be really tough.
right. And Brandon, I agree with you. I mean, when I went through, I mean, you can see it in the
Yeah,
early articles on this list. Like I basically I started with like an open slate that said who can actually help this offense, right? And the answer to that really comes down to a if you accept the fact that um, Jordan Alvarez is going to be here in the postseason, then and and if you think Michael Brantley is going to be here in the postseason, which I'm not too sure about, but even if it's just one, then your only real place to improve this team based on the manager is center field.
yeah.
And that Luis Robert was like the only big option, only player that could really do that. And the Astros may have reached that same conclusion. I mean, if the Luis Robert part of this trade comes true, it's going to be an all day party. You're going to hear it from me 100 times that day. That I am the one that on whatever day it was that I wrote the original article, Wild Astros Trade Ideas, that said we should get Luis Robert. I will be peacocking and saying that I'm the one that told the Astros to do it, and it just took them a month and a half to do what I told them to. Somewhat similar to what I said about Mancini, although Mancini didn't really turn out right.
Right.
And like last year, I said the Astros needed to get a good catcher. And the only reason I didn't point, and man, I was thinking Contreras. The only reason I didn't point to Vasquez is because I don't think Vasquez became available
To the
until
last
like
minute.
to the last minute from the
Yeah, that
Boston
was
side.
really it's just Boston. You wouldn't think in that
Right.
situation they do that.
So I mean, guys, the question one always has to consider is, and then what I mean, I don't have it on this list in this article, but there's another article that talks about the buyers and sellers, and I recognize I need to go back to that article. I just haven't been doing. I think I've been waiting for another week or two. I guess I will update it in like a week because like it's there's teams that at the end of that are it's not clear who's buying and selling yet. I mean,
Nope.
it's wild. Here we are on July 20th, and we still don't know so many. Like, are the San Diego Padres buying or selling?
Yep.
I don't know, and that's crazy not to know.
And that's one thing I've been thinking about too, especially with ours, is like, are the Rangers are probably not done.
Right.
So
Yeah,
there's going to
what
be a lot to consider there.
I do know the Texas Rangers and I do know the Baltimore Orioles are big buyers.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a couple other teams that like I expect the Braves are going to fill in, and unfortunately, a lot of these teams want starting pitching guys. The realities for the Astros is they may have to wait until like the big teams get what they want, and
Mhm.
let's just hope Jordan Montgomery is available because he's not
Yeah.
he's like Clint said, he's not the sexiest one to go pick. So we'll get the leftovers. Okay, I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to carry the analogy too far, but
Yeah.
I mean that may be where we're at in the pecking order. Like
Yeah. To me, Larry, it just speaks to the year that this team has had and the expectations and the standard of winning that has come with it. And now we're faced with we're in a dogfight
right,
and the expectations and everybody's outlook is, well, we need stars to improve this team. I said, well, we do have stars. It's just the pieces that we used to have that made this team so unique with the 5 or 6 starters and the stacked bullpen and the guys that you know were there are just not there. That was the fortunate thing, was we were healthy in 2022. I mean,
right.
outside of some minor things and Lance McCullers, we were healthy.
And he was coming back at about this point. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys, I don't claim sources, so I don't know if the Astros are really making this trade. They may happen, but let's talk about what that like everybody the biggest fallacy I see is that people will clickbait you with like we can get Dylan Cease and Luis Robert, and they don't tell you what that really will be. Well, I tried to put together a trade, and the trade values tool and people have pointed out, well, you can trade Brown and get it. Like, well, trading Brown really doesn't help you in this scenario because you're trading one pitcher for. I mean, I would actually rather have Hunter Brown for the next 5 years than Dylan Cease for the next two. Okay, but
Yep.
that's just me. But so I'm not trading Hunter Brown in a Dylan Cease trade. So the
So
package
you
that the
you almost, sorry, Larry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you cut off your nose to spite your face because
exactly.
you're looking for controllable pitching and high ceiling, potential high ceiling and things like that, and you're going to trade away one of your better pitching, younger pitchers for less control. There's logic in there that just doesn't always jive.
So if we're going to get an all-star level center fielder and an all-star level starting pitcher, what can we afford to give up? Well, with the Astro system, we can actually afford. I mean, you guys are going to hate me when I say this, but you could give up Kyle Tucker. Okay, you could give up Jeremy Pena because you have Dubon that could play shortstop. You could give up McCormick. Now you're putting Myers in one of the outfield spots, or you're putting Jokes in the other outfield spot. You could you could be convinced that you've got enough depth in your farm system that you can give the number one prospect away and Drew Gilbert. You could say, I don't need Garcia anymore because he's hurt this year and he'll be better next year, and that's okay for the White Sox. So we'll trade essentially Garcia's innings next year for Dylan Cease's innings next year. That's obviously a huge upgrade. And then you could turn around and say, I'll trade my super young and high rising prospect Clifford. Now, all of you should be like railing on me that that's way too much to give away. You're giving away your all-star outfielder, your starting shortstop, your starting center fielder who's hitting the ball like a wild man right now, and your number one prospect and one of your top three prospects, and one of your starting pitchers. That should be too much. Well, actually, it's not enough to do this deal according to the trade values tool. And the problem is when I tried to add another player to the Astros to try to get even closer to fair, it says, "Whoa, it's not realistic to add this many players to a trade. Let's cut back a bit." So I can't tell you what actually the trade a fair trade would be, because the trade tool told me no. I can't add a seventh player to the deal.
Well, the fair trade is you remove someone from this list with someone who has more value,
Right.
and then
It hurts even more.
you're even more upset about it.
Right. Yeah, you trade Yanier Diaz in the deal,
Yeah.
and you cut yourself off on another position.
Yep.
And so, guys, when when you see these articles and people are clickbaiting you with all these these outlandish ideas, and I will tell you, these are the same people that have done this before. Okay, they told you that we were going to get Brian Reynolds. Somebody told me that they were saying we were going to get, I can't even remember. We were going to get some great pitcher, right? Like these guys, they do it every year to you. Stop paying attention to them and pay attention to the guys that tell you about the real things that the Astros can do. And if they blow us away, then they blow us away with like doing something phenomenal. But the realities of this deal is you're trading for 2 years of Dylan Cease and 4 years of Luis Robert plus this year, and you're giving away 24 years of control in those players that I listed. The Astros, if they, I'm going to tell you, if the Astros do this, then you're in for another marathon, and it's a tirade filled hate marathon that no one is going to want to listen to, because I will be so angry and upset that basically they sealed the fate of this dynasty to be a 2 to 3 year window, because that's what will happen if they made that deal that I just called up there. That's what it would mean. So that's the long and short of like what a true Dylan Cease and Luis Robert deal, fair deal, looks like. Now we can hope that they're crazy and they assign twice the value of every one of those players. And if Dana Brown convinces them to give us 161 value for 80, and the list is half, I mean, if you can come up with like if we can shed away half of those players, I then are and we're having a party and we're celebrating that Dana Brown is the greatest GM in the history of Major League Baseball. Okay, but I just don't think I don't think the White Sox are that dumb. I just don't.
Yep. Well, then that always brings into the fact of it's not the White Sox would put themselves in a position of that's I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
That's a fireable offense for someone to get anything less than the absolute most, especially for somebody like Luis Robert in the year he's having and things like that.
So let's take Dylan Cease out of the conversation. Let's assume we do something like we already talked about earlier with getting a pitcher and a long reliever. What if we were focused back on getting Luis Robert? Okay, that's still we're still trading for 109.8 trade value.
Yep.
That's going to start with, I mean, either it's a Tucker Pena or it's Pena, McCormick, and Gilbert
Yep.
conversation. All right. So the prospect oriented side of this deal would be the one that's at the top of the page right now. Pena, McCormick, Lee, Gilbert, Garcia, and Clifford. Okay, that gets you into the ballpark, but I still think it's not enough value. It's only, I'm giving you a 94 for 109. I don't think they do that deal. Plus, the reality is that if they really are shopping Luis Robert, they're probably going to get a better offer from somebody like the New York Yankees or somebody else that's got a deeper farm system than we do, right? So the the more major league oriented portion of this, now this is a conversation. If we're actually going to have a real conversation about a Luis Robert deal, this is what it looks like. Kyle Tucker, Jeremy Pena, Jake Myers, and Corey Lee.
Yeah.
That is a deal that I think the White Sox would go for. That is a deal that probably makes the Astros short term better. That's a deal you can put McCormick in right field in place of Kyle Tucker. You can put Dubon in place of Pena. You're not using Lee anyway,
You would
and
still
you,
have
and you
some,
put and you put Luis Robert in center field for Myers.
yeah, you still have some room to work if you wanted to go get a Jordan Montgomery or someone of
Right.
that pitching stature. I just, Larry, I don't want to. I don't know how many times I've come to you and said, "What are we going to do about Tucker?" And what are we
Yeah.
really thinking about? Um, and I've always said, if they really wanted to make a splash and do something that really changed it, I figured you would trade Tucker to help rebuild and get some control. But that would be the argument that I would make is if you're going to trade someone like Kyle Tucker, you would want him to be the Luis Robert in this deal.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know,
You'd want to trade Tucker for a 30 level player and
yeah,
like a systems top three prospects or something like that, right?
yeah,
But this is flipping that, and I guys, you can have. I mean, we could spend an hour just talking about that deal, whether or not we like it or not, whether or not it's worth. I mean, Brandon, I tend to think that Tucker's pretty close to Robert too. Although, and here's the thing: Robert has been really not very like. You look at his career stats; he's not played 162 games in a year. He's been hurt a lot.
this is
So
this is one of those anomaly years. We talk about him all the time, Larry. We see him all the
right.
time.
So you're essentially buying high with Luis Robert, and then what are you going to do? I mean, if you trade away Myers, what are you going to do for center field, and what are you going to do for right field? I mean, right field essentially becomes Corey Jokes, and you put McCormick in center if when Luis Robert gets hurt, and then you're running Jordan Alvarez in left field. There, I mean, you can do this deal, but you're just know that you're in the off season. You got to go get because you lose Maldonado. You get 2 more years of control versus Tucker. I mean, guys, I can lawyer this for both sides of this deal. This is when I know a deal is fair. I see Clint's face go, oh, right.
Yep,
If a deal is fair, both teams are hating the deal. You're asking something from both of those teams. They're like, oh man, do I have to give up Luis Robert? I really want more than that. Like, and if you're the Astros, like, man, I can't give up my catcher and Pena and Tucker. Like that's like you're asking for three. You're asking for 2.5 starters and a future starter for these. I mean, oh my gosh. Yeah, and Brandon, you can solve this problem in the off season, right? Right.
I mean we could have solved it last off season too.
we could,
We
right.
could have. There was a really good option of
Here
Andrew
we go
Benintendi
again. Oh no, it's Joey Gallo. Joey
or
Gallo.
Joey Gallo, the Joey Gallo of the world. I
Joey
forget about
Gallo.
him all the time. We let that low cost, low risk, high reward option just float off into the sunset, and we're seeing it pay dividends for Minnesota right now.
Right, Liz. A good trade makes
Yeah,
both sides hurt, right? And that's like when you get these clickbaity things and they're just like we can get this and we're gonna trade this and this and if you think well that seems like a real win for the Astros, guess what? It's not a real. I mean, you guys have got the resources right now, right? You've got the resources in the Larry the GM article base that you can go figure out is this deal even close to fair. If you rather go to the baseball trade values website, you can do it on there. You can guys, you have the tools to to be empowered to know these things are just bogus. And all I'm really asking for is I work my butt off in July to give you real options, real scenarios. And all I really asking for a return is like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the website. Um, and even if you really want to make me feel like what I'm doing is valuable, go sign up for Patreon and support the Patreon website, right,
Yep.
guys? That's really what I asked for. So all right. So there's Larry at night, almost 80 85 minutes in. I will pause and stop and ask, is there other questions? But guys, I wanted to give you all that. I wanted to